All right, posterior pelvic tilt is really painful and it sucks, and in this video I'm going to show you exactly what I did to work this out very recently in myself. Now, posterior pelvic tilt is basically when your lower back flattens, so you lose that natural healthy lumbar curve and it becomes flat or even protrudes outward. And what's going on here is that your glutes are locked up. And in most cases, they're extremely tight and they're in spasm. And these glute muscles are so tight and locked up with constant tension that they're pulling your pelvis backward and downward the wrong way so that your whole back and lower spine is out of alignment. And this is extremely painful and physically limiting. Like if you have this right now, you'll know exactly what I mean, but it's pretty much impossible to bend over to pick anything up because it just hurts because there's so much strain going on in that area. And this is the exact opposite of anterior pelvic tilt, where the pelvis tilts the other way. That's usually due to overactive and tight hip flexor muscles in the front of the body pulling your pelvis the other way. But in this case of posterior pelvic tilt, which, side little tangent here, I actually think this is a bigger problem than anterior pelvic tilt, even though anterior pelvic tilt, or some abbreviate this as APT, gets way more videos, way more search volume. Like when I was doing preliminary market research for this topic, I found that anterior pelvic tilt literally gets like 6 to 8 times more searches in Google and in YouTube than posterior pelvic tilt. And I think that's stupid because I think most people fall into posterior pelvic tilt. Like when we sit all day, we're naturally just going into a posterior pelvic tilt, and our bodies are really susceptible to falling into this at any point in time. So to the potentially very small minority of people that this problem affects, this is going to be an absolute gem, because I literally just went through this and I just figured it out and worked it out, and I'll tell you how I got there and what I did to get it out. But until you tackle this, like, this is an extremely limiting and debilitating problem. So without further ado, I'm going to show you 4 exercises that I did to help fix this problem and correct it very easily. It only took a couple days once I figured out what the actual source of the problem was. And each of these exercises has a very important part and something that you don't want to neglect. So the first thing we're gonna do is we're gonna get rid of glute tension and tightness. So we're gonna stretch the living hell out of the glute muscles. And this is gonna be probably the most uncomfortable step, because if your glutes are locked up and they're in spasm, it's gonna be really uncomfortable to stretch, and you might even feel a little bit of nerve sensation going off. You can always start with massage. That's just gonna make you a little bit more susceptible to stretch. So going to see a massage therapist or digging in your tissue with a QL claw or a ball or something is gonna help make this first step easier before even jumping into stretching and lengthening the glutes. All right, stretch 1, the first stretch here. I don't even know what to call it. Let's go with single leg, hamstring, glute emphasized posterior stretch. And what we're doing here is we're basically targeting the glute under load. So we're gonna do 1 leg at a time, because bending over with 2 legs is probably gonna be extremely uncomfortable. And we're gonna elevate this foot onto a bench, a chair, a shelf, or something around knee to waist high. And from here, we're gonna lean forward into the stretch. And I actually like leaning at a little bit of an angle to target the glute muscle better. Like, orient your upper body and your whole stance and setup, kind of like how I have it here, in the way that targets the glute muscle best. Like, this isn't a hamstring stretch, and we don't want to focus on the hamstring or the back of the calf, or God forbid, the back when we're doing this stretch. Like, we want all of our tension and all of our stress and force to be on the glute. And once you can find that sweet spot and orient your body in the right way, like maybe just copy what I have here because this is how I felt it best. We want to sit here and we want to do about 15 to 20 what I call pulse reps. And this is putting a lot of load and stress at the end range of motion. So what this is going to help do is basically force the glute muscle into length submission by torture and trial by stretch fire to help this muscle lengthen and give you more slack and range of motion so that your pelvis can correct back into place peacefully. And make sure to do this with both sides. Here's me doing it on the other side for another 15 to 20 reps. And I do this whole circuit twice. So I go from one exercise to the next and then just repeat the whole circuit. And maybe it feels better for you to just do this twice and then the next thing twice and then that thing after that twice. But whatever works for you, try to get 2 sets in of this movement. The second thing we do here is another glute stretch. So this is the second and the final thing we're gonna do for the glutes. And this is so important because the glutes are what need the most work if you have posterior pelvic tilt. And the second stretch we're gonna do here is 2 pigeon stretch modifications on each side. We're gonna target different angles of the glutes with each stretch. So at first I target kind of putting the head over the knee. This is gonna be the easier angle to stretch the glute at, and it's gonna target more of the glute max and kind of the longer head of the glute. And then after that, I'm gonna go towards the foot. So trying to get my head driven towards the foot, and that's gonna stretch more of the piriformis and glute minimus and some of those deeper, smaller glute muscles that just have less range to go, and they're usually tighter and angrier than the longer glute maxes. And one thing I'll say here, kind of as a disclaimer, is this is gonna be the most uncomfortable and the most challenging thing you're gonna do in your posterior pelvic tilt correction. Like, it's gonna be uncomfortable and maybe even potentially painful at times. Like, make sure you're not doing damage or anything, but like, if it's uncomfortable, try to push through it, because the more length and the more stress we can put on the glute muscles in this position, like, the better off you'll be in the following minutes, hours, days, weeks, basically forever beyond this little time of being in discomfort. And for sets and reps for the pigeon, I like to do about 10 to 12 for each angle for each side. So 10 to 12 over the knee on the left first, and then 10 to 12 over the foot on the left side, and then I switch to the right and do the same thing. The third corrective exercise I'm doing here is a back extension on the ground. And now the reason for doing this one is with posterior pelvic tilt, our spine is actually kind of curved the wrong way or neutral, and we want to restore that natural lumbar curve to the lower back. And doing a back extension exercise, which you can also do standing, but I really like it on the ground, is gonna help correct your lower back into that position and let your body know that that is safe and that's where it should be. So if you're really stiff and your body's really angry at you for your posterior pelvic tilt, this could be also a little bit uncomfortable. So start where you can and just slow the breath. Try to get the body to relax. Try to get comfortable into this position. Breathe deep into the belly and slowly move up from your elbows to your hands to doing full-blown kind of press up type back extensions. I was hanging out here for about 30 to 60 seconds, kind of depending on if I was doing press-ups or just staying stationary in one spot. You'll know pretty quickly what feels best for you, and just go with what feels best in this case, because that's your body just telling you, this is good, keep doing it. And then getting out of the back extension position, like don't do anything crazy and don't test your back right away. Just like Stuart McGill's spine hygiene principles say, like just get out of the position, keep your back neutral. Don't go and like start folding over and see if it worked right away. Just stand up, stand normal, try to have a normal spine, and move on to the next exercise here. All right, lastly, we have exercise 4, and that's gonna be something to strengthen the lower abs. And now what I'm gonna show you here is kind of a hanging leg crunch variation, but basically the reason we want to do this is because one of the reasons our posterior pelvic tilt happened in the first place is because we lacked strength in the hip flexors and the lower ab muscles. And the reason we want to strengthen the lower abs and the hip flexor muscles is because these are the muscles that fight the glutes for pelvic position. So if you can picture the hip flexors and the lower abs right here and the glutes right here and the pelvis lines in between here, when we have posterior pelvic tilt, right, this is the glutes, it pulls the pelvis back in this direction, and the hip flexor and the abs are actually weak. So if they were stronger, they wouldn't let the glutes just pull the pelvis down, but they were, so they did. So we were lacking in strength in these muscles, the hip flexors and the lower abs, to get into posterior pelvic tilt in the first place. Now, if we can think of anterior pelvic tilt, which is hip flexors, or people usually just say hip flexors, but it's hip flexors and lower abs, over tightening, that's going to cause anterior pelvic tilt the other way. So we don't want to over tighten and over stimulate the lower abs and hip flexor muscles without paying attention to the glutes. But for posterior pelvic tilt case, we have over tension in the glutes and not enough strength and tightness, honestly, in the hip flexors and lower abs. So we want to help correct ourselves that way. Now, what do I actually do for this? So I don't know the name of this. I kind of just do exercises by feel and motion, and I don't really know what a lot of them are called. But this one I'll call a chin up, hold, lower ab, hip flexor crunch. And this is definitely more of an advanced movement, I would say, for the lower abs. But if you can get 20 good reps doing this motion here, where you kick the legs out and then crunch them back in, you should feel a really good burn in the lower abs. And beyond pelvic alignment, it just gives you a lot more stability and kind of confidence and strength in the lower back. And if your lower gut is sticking out, this is going to help tighten in all the muscles and basically your whole body around the belly button, so it'll help you look a little better and feel a little tighter and more confident down there as well. So yeah, there you have it. That's my take on posterior pelvic tilt. I fell into posterior pelvic tilt about a week and a half ago doing frickin' burpees, which is probably the lamest way of all time to trigger a back injury. But you live and learn. From that, I learned, I guess, don't be friends with people who do burpees. This is a rant for another video, but I actually think burpees are one of the stupidest exercises. There's a million things you can do better for aesthetics. There's a million things you can do better for core. There's a million things you can better do for endurance and kind of like low volume, steady state cardio. Like it's kind of the worst of all exercises put together, and you're basically getting a watered down version of any other exercise by doing it. But yeah, I'm out of that now, feeling a lot better. I actually just ripped out some bent over row sets when I was filming the B-roll for this, so that a little bit of evidence, proof from the pudding that my lower back can handle that, and it's all feeling better. Glutes are doing well. And lastly, I'll shout out my one-to-one coaching again, because if you're looking to fix your back pain or just live a more functional, healthy overall life, I am still taking clients in a one-to-one setting. What I've learned after doing this with a handful of guys is that it's a lot more than just back pain relief. Like obviously we do corrective exercises and stretches and habit correction and build workouts for you to fix your back pain and get out of that as soon as possible. But this coaching is really a lot more than that. And what it's kind of evolved into is just helping you build a more functional and athletic and sustainable body for whatever activities you want to do and get into for the future. And what I really like doing and what this coaching is it helps you get to whatever kind of range of functional lifestyle you want. Like you might have seen my interview a couple weeks ago with Andy, who is my MMA client, who we we helped get back into the cage, like fighting people, like UFC style cage fighting. And he's one end of the extreme, and he's better, he's back fighting again. But on the other end, we also just have guys who want to be able to walk around day to day without pain, or like one guy who just graduated, just wanted to get back into being able to play golf without pain, which is a lot more low impact and has a totally different regimen and principles behind it than someone trying to fight MMA, for example. But yeah, so whatever your goals are, if you want to kind of get to the next level and get some intimate one-to-one coaching with me, feel free to book a call at the link below. I love talking to you guys and love interacting and helping people with this stuff. So yeah, hope to see more of you inside. And until then, we will see you in the next one.